Is a tree a plant? No, I just had an epiphany. Oh my god, no. I just had an epiphany, okay. Hello everyone. On my channel, I analyze song lyrics very in depth through the lens of literary analysis. Today we are doing the song Ivy. I will be making my way through every song on Evermore and every song on Folklore, but this one was requested, so we're gonna do it a little bit earlier. A quick disclaimer before we get started, music is very subjective, so everything presented in this video is my own personal opinion. I always encourage you all to comment down below what your thoughts are. I think that words are very important for that reason. On my channel, I tend to concentrate on diction, which is word choice, and connotation, which can be thought of as like the vibes or the emotions that the words elicit. With all of that being said, let's just get started. This song is called Ivy. There's definitely a pattern of plant-themed songs on this album. I already analyzed the song Willow by Taylor Swift. Willow is a tree, not a plant. Is a tree considered a plant? It's a very good question. Let's find out. Is a tree a plant?
In its broadest sense. A tree is any plant with a general form of an elongated stem or trunk, which supports the photosynthetic needs of branches and distance above the ground.
I need to reread that, hold on. I think a tree is a plant, so that's great. I'm glad we all know that now. So an ivy is a climbing plant. It has vines. Probably seen them on the sides of buildings or even like in the arches in gardens. They can climb, they can kind of conform to the space they're in. I've noticed that in a few places it mentions that ivy is very easy to train. You can kind of train it which direction to go so it can cover the area you want in the way that you want. As far as symbolism goes, ivy symbolizes fidelity. It won't easily let go of something it's attached itself to. It also symbolizes eternal life because the plant is evergreen, which means that it's in season all year. Those are very interesting things to consider, and I'm definitely going to keep that in mind as we go through the lyrics. This song overall is about the protagonist. The protagonist is the main character. The protagonist is engaged to someone, however, they're in love with someone else. I'm gonna say she just because I visualized it through the perspective of Taylor, but this is fictional, so the protagonist can be anyone. The point is, this is a very tricky situation. I kind of view this song as happening in like the older times, like way back in the day when people were actually promised hands in marriage. It was like a duty to marry someone specific. That's how I'm viewing it. Verse 1. How's one to know? I'd meet you where the spirit meets the bones. In a faith-forgotten land. In from the snow, your touch brought forth an incandescent glow. Tarnished, but so grand. This is sort of an internal monologue by the protagonist, expressing a little bit of surprise about how her true love fell into her lap. Suggests that this was an unexpected love. She was super shook. First, I want to concentrate on the second half of this line that says where the spirit meets the bone. The spirit I like to think of as someone's soul. Some people think of the human experience as a soul within a physical body. The spirit is a soul, right? And then the bones are like the physical vessel of the body. And when they meet, that's when you have life, right? So like the soul can be like floating in the ethers and the bones are just bones. But when they come together and they meet, it's like a synergistic effect. The sum, life, is greater than the parts. That's how I'm interpreting the second half of this line. Taylor is making that process of the soul and the body meeting. She's making that into a location. She's using the word where. It's like X marks the spot where the soul and body meet. That's where we meet. This is really beautiful. So for me, I think like the soul and the body meeting is a very sacred and beautiful process. When you truly love someone, there's a great depth to it. There's a purity to a true love. That's what this line is expressing. She is saying that we met each other at the very core, at the very essence of our being. And this location is a very vulnerable place. It's sacred. She's saying that's the place where we met. I would argue that only your truest, purest love can have access to that location. Hashtag soulmate vibes. She's saying, how's one to know? This was a surprise, kind of alluding to the randomness of life where you don't know that something significant and beautiful is gonna happen, but it does. In a faith-forgotten land. So she is taking a place within you, like emotionally or spiritually, and she's making that into a setting. The faith forgotten land is a descriptor for the innermost part of their soul. When you have faith about something, you believe that you're gonna have a very positive and great outcome, even though you don't have evidence for that. However, in this metaphorical land, faith has been forgotten. I think she's describing how she felt internally before her soulmate came in to the picture. I think that in the innermost part of her being, the protagonist just felt down and sad. You can feel emotions, but when you feel something in your soul, there's a greater depth to it. You can feel sad, but I would argue that there's another type of sadness and even another type of happiness where you feel it deeper than an emotion. I feel like an emotion can exist like in a more like shallow place, like outwardly, but then when you feel something in the depths of your soul, it's just like you feel it like inside of your body, just like floating there. So that inside of the body sort of feeling is what I believe is being described here. In from the snow, your touch brought forth an incandescent I cannot say that word, oh my goodness. An incandescent glow. Pretend I said that at a normal speed and that I didn't have to sound it out. When she's saying in from the snow, she's talking about herself. This is describing how she felt like emotionally. She felt like she just came in from the snow. When you come in from the snow, you're not like super comfortable. You're not really at ease, right? For me, the protagonist in this instance was emotionally not at ease. She was kind of like restless. However, her true love, her soulmate, comes into the picture. She is saying that her soulmate brought an incandescent glow into her life. This is light imagery. Light is very important. It can illuminate truths. I talked about light imagery in more detail in my analysis of the song Daylight by Taylor Swift. I will link it if you're interested. This is not sunlight. This is an incandescent sort of light. So when you look up the word incandescent, it of course refers to an incandescent light bulb. So that literally is light imagery. It also gives off a little bit of heat, right? It can help you see and it can provide some warmth. However, another definition for incandescent is something that is full of strong emotion or passionate. Their touch brought forth an incandescent glow. This soulmate brought a warmth to the protagonist's life. They brought light into the protagonist's life. Incandescent is not like the brightest light. It's like a warm, glowing sort of vibe. It can be moody, it can create an ambiance, so it can be like a cozy sort of vibe. When you feel cozy, you feel safe. And then when we take into consideration the second definition that I read, the protagonist's true love also brought passion into her life. The phrase brought forth, I enjoy a lot. I feel like when you say bring forth, you like coax something out of hiding. You're like bringing it forth. In this faith forgotten land, this soulmate, this true love was able to bring forth a glow. This glow would not exist in the protagonist's emotional soul landscape without her true love being there. Tarnished but so grand. Tarnished means that something has lost its shine. It's not like in top peak condition anymore. Tarnished can refer to like a few different things. I think it can refer to the true love's touch. Their touch could be tarnished because of the context it's occurring in. Glow could be tarnished, but I kind of think that maybe the memory is tarnished or the whole occurrence is tarnished. I think that the protagonist is thinking back to her first meeting with her true love. You know, when you meet your soulmate, you want that memory to be something so beautiful and it's just like something that you treasure. I'm sure she does treasure it, but like there's so many other things at play that are hindering her from viewing it in a completely positive light. She's engaged to someone else, she has to marry them, and she can't be with her true love. It's like looking back on something that you lost, even though it was like something very beautiful. There's always gonna be that very intense feeling of sadness and of loss. It's just feeling opposite emotions at the same time. A concept that I talked about in my lyric analysis of the song Wildest Dreams by Taylor Swift, which will be linked below. When I think of the word grand, I get like this sort of vibe. It's like very like dramatic. It's kind of like a movie. So this was a very significant thing that happened. I think that there's an obligation she has to her current like fiance. So that's why I kind of feel like this is taking place in the olden times, because during those times you had an obligation to marry someone and you couldn't really like say no sometimes, just like due to the social customs and the social environment of the time. So technically there's cheating going on, which is not right and it's not good. I don't think that this is like, oh, I'm looking for a thrill, I'm gonna go cheat. I think this is very much like she's not in love with her fiance. She never was. She's marrying him out of obligation, and she is like in a very deep, pure love with someone else, and she just can't help it. That's how I feel about the song. Let me know what you think of in the comments below. Verse 2. This verse is 3 lines, but I feel so many feelings when I read it and hear it. And the old widow goes to the stone every day, but I don't. I just sit here and wait, grieving for the living. Everything is so intentional in this song. A widow is someone who has lost their spouse. Their spouse has died. The stone is referring to a gravestone. This widow is visiting the gravestone of their spouse every day. They still love them, paying their respects. I think that this is just a very intense juxtaposition, illustrating that people go and visit and pay respects to the dead and they grieve for the dead, but the protagonist doesn't need to grieve the dead because she has something to grieve right now in the midst of living. She says she's sitting there and waiting. She is anticipating something. She knows she's gonna have to marry someone she doesn't love and therefore lose someone and not be able to truly be with someone she does love. She's just sitting there and waiting for it because there's nothing she can do. That's why I think this is like a marriage that has to happen, and she has like no ability to back out of it because she's just sitting there and waiting. She has no power in the situation to like get up and go and say like, nah fam, I don't want to marry you. So she's grieving for the living. She's not a widow, but one could argue that perhaps that widow had a fuller life because they lost something that they love, but they were able to love them every day when they were alive. But this protagonist is grieving something in the midst of living, and the thing that she's grieving, her not being able to be with her true love, is like a death to her. Her true love is still alive, but she cannot be with them. She's grieving it now, and she's gonna grieve it forever. It was very striking to me the first time that I heard this lyric. If you're grieving for the living, that's very ironic. She's expressing this in a very like direct and very emotional sort of way. She's grieving a life that she doesn't have the option to live. That just shows the depth of pain that she is in. Thank goodness. Taylor Swift, what are you doing with your lyrics, girl? Chorus. Oh, goddamn. My pain fits in the palm of your freezing hand, taking mine, but it's been promised to another. Oh, I can't stop you putting roots in my dreamland. My house of stone, your ivy grows, and now I'm covered in you. My pain fits in the palm of your freezing hand, taking mine. For me, when I interpret this, I keep reading the second line until I hit the comma in the next line, and that to me is like a full sentence kind of. When you read it, it says, my pain fits in the palm of your freezing hand, taking mine. So to me, they're holding hands. When you hold hands with someone that you have a very deep connection with, you can kind of like emotionally talk to each other just by hand holding, just being close to each other physically. If she's engaged, I don't think she can like hang out with her true love all the time and just be very open about it. A lot of these things are done in secrecy. Later on, she talks about borrowed time, stolen time. The simple act of holding hands is one method of communication for them. She is able to express the intense pain she's feeling about their situation through hand holding with her true love. That's why she's saying it fits in the palm of your freezing hand. She's not saying that her pain is small, that's why it's able to fit. No, I think she's saying that like you can feel my pain just by touching my hand, like palm to palm. It's fitting in your palm. So like from her soul, her pain is like going through her arm and just like being emitted here, and it's like being communicated to her true love when they're holding hands. The word freezing here for me also has a negative connotation. When you're freezing, it's not comfortable. It just is a word that connotes loneliness and isolation when you're cold. Usually when you're with someone, especially when it's like someone you like romantically, there's gonna be a feeling of warmth. The freezing hand here is just illustrating that their situation, although the love is pure and true, they can't do anything to like physically feel warm because everything is in secrecy, but also emotionally they're feeling cold because they can't move forward in their love. Her hand has been promised to another. This is referring to the saying of asking for someone's hand in marriage. So her hand in marriage has been promised to someone else. Metaphorically, her hand is someone else's, which means that she's engaged to someone, but literally she's holding hands with her true love. When you like take into account the imagery that Taylor is expressing, it's always heartbreaking. And she used the word landing in the song Champagne Problems. I'll link my analysis below. I was able to create a movie scenario that I like fake acted out for you guys. It's pretty much Oscar worthy, but just by using that word landing, we were able to craft that whole like narrative. I think there's a lot of value in trying to visualize everything that is being said in Taylor's music, because look how beautiful and heartbreaking it is. Oh, I can't stop you putting roots in my dreamland. Protagonist cannot stop the feelings she's having. This true love is putting roots in the protagonist's dreamland. When roots exist for a tree or for a plant, it means that they are in the ground pretty firmly. It's gonna take a lot to like pull them out or to move them. It's like your feet are firmly planted. Roots connote stability. Roots also provide nutrition to whatever is like rooted there. They get water from the soil, they get nutrients from the soil. That's their source of food through the roots. Roots are very important. And even when you think about it more metaphorically, like, oh, like my roots are in so-and-so place, like your hometown, it's where you feel like stable and it's where you are nourished, right? Like your family and your friends are there, etc. The protagonist here is in very deep, right? This true love, this soulmate, is putting roots in her dreamland. When I hear the word dreamland, I think of daydreaming and of just a very like idealistic sort of place where your deepest desires and your wants exist. This true love is putting roots down in the figurative space where the protagonist daydreams. In this dreamscape of hers, it's all about this soulmate, this true love. It's not like, you know, sometimes you have like a crush on someone and in your own like dreamscape, in your own dreamland, I kind of envision those people as like clouds like moving through. It's kind of like daydreaming about them, but it's not anything intense. But in her dreamland, if we were to think about it as like an actual place, there's a lot of trees and flowers. They're rooted there. They're not gonna leave. Like she's not gonna forget about it. It's not like a crush that like floats away as a cloud. She's always gonna want this person. She has no control in this. My house of stone, your ivy grows, and now I'm covered in you. So this is all a metaphor. The protagonist is a house of stone. A house of stone to me is pretty sturdy. Another reason why I think this is taking place in like an older time, I kind of envision stone houses as existing more in the olden times. And then the true love is associated with ivy. The true love is not directly ivy. It says your ivy, so the ivy is like possessed by the love interest. So for me, I'm viewing the protagonist as the house of stone. I view the ivy as being the essence of the true love. This true love walked into the protagonist's life. The house is stationary and stone is like pretty heavy, so like I'm pretty sure the house wasn't like walking around anywhere. But then the ivy, which is like lighter and it can move, it came in and then slowly and surely kept going through like all of the grooves of the house, and then the whole house became covered in ivy, which is the image for the official lyric video to this song. The protagonist has pretty much just been like marked by this person. They're all over them. Figuratively, they're not really two people like this anymore. They're just like existing next to each other and there's like an aura around them. They've become one in a way. It's very heartbreaking because they can't be together, but it's very beautifully expressed. Verse 3. I wish to know the fatal flaw that makes you long to be magnificently cursed. He's in the room. Your opal eyes are all I wish to see. He wants what's only yours. So first I want to talk about magnificently cursed. When something is magnificent, it's usually used in a positive light. Let's actually look up the word magnificent to see what it means. The word magnificent means something that is impressively beautiful, elaborate, or extravagant. It's something striking, also defined as something very good or excellent. So she's saying that her true love is cursed in a very excellent, beautiful, elaborate, and extravagant way. Those two words are opposing. Those two words usually are not next to one another. That's something to keep in mind. I'm gonna get to that in a second. When it says I wish to know, this is something that the protagonist is really thinking about. I think it's when you're kind of in awe of someone, you're like, I just don't understand how you exist. I'm trying to figure you out. I think it's that sort of vibe. The fatal means something that can result in like death, right? It's a very like intense sort of flaw. And a flaw is kind of like an imperfection or just like a bad habit. The protagonist knows the depth of feeling they both have for one another. It's kind of like, you know how I feel, I know how you feel, we know that this is real. What is this fatal flaw? Like what's wrong with you that you are actively choosing to explore these feelings with me when you know we can never be together? That's something that's illogical, right? Because you're setting yourself up for pain, a very intense and deep sort of pain. When she says magnificently cursed, she's not saying that her true love is cursed. She's saying that her true love longs to be magnificently cursed. Cursed in a very grand and extravagant way. This love interest is choosing to be cursed. This protagonist is viewing everything very intensely because she's feeling everything very intensely. We know this from earlier because she's grieving this, so it makes sense that she's viewing this like a curse. This love interest, this soulmate, is choosing to explore as much of this love as they can before they can't anymore. They are choosing hurt. The protagonist is like, why are you choosing this? Why are you choosing to be cursed? She's the one that's stationary. She's a stone house. She's the one that we can argue is already kind of cursed, right? She has no way out. She has to marry this person. But this love interest is the one that can move. They're with the ivy. They can move and they can adapt to wherever they're at. So they're not cursed. They're not a stone house that's very heavy and cannot move. They have like the option to walk away. They're not engaged to anyone. She is. The protagonist is. She's already cursed, right? This kind of reminds me of the song Wildest Dreams by Taylor Swift that I analyzed. I always link every song I mentioned down below because in that song, it wasn't really about true love. It was just about feeling something very intense for someone, but they were actively together and sharing moments. There was an awareness that there was the end. This soulmate is choosing to be cursed, but they don't care. This is showing us how pure and deep and true this love is from both sides. It's not one-sided at all. He's in the room. Your opal eyes are all I wish to see. He wants what's only yours. In the presence of her fiance, all she can think about is her soulmate, her true love. She just wants to see her true love's opal eyes. There's actually quite a bit of symbolism associated with this, so I'm gonna touch upon them really briefly. So first off, opal is a type of stone and it comes in a wide range of colors. As you can see here through the pictures, there are specks of different colors within just one stone. It makes me think that the protagonist knows the exact shade and the specks of color in her true love's eyes. So that's one interesting thing that you can think about, the unique nature of opals. When you want to get more into the symbolism of an opal stone, it becomes even more interesting. What really stood out to me, just like the ivy, the opal can be a symbol of fidelity, and fidelity just means to be loyal in a relationship. This is very ironic because this song is about infidelity, so this does bring a lot of irony into this song, and it adds another nuanced layer to everything. If you notice, the symbols of fidelity are not associated with the protagonist. They're continuously associated with the love interest, with the soulmate. We can look at this in many different ways. You can look at it as if the soulmate is faithful to the protagonist, because in essence, it's the protagonist who's actively cheating. However, the soulmate is helping her cheat. It depends on how you want to look at this dynamic. I also noticed that opals are associated with the eye. It's believed that they have a strong therapeutic value for diseases of the eye. It could be significant that opal is associated with like the health of the eye, and in the song it says opal eyes. We've heard the phrase eyes are the window to the soul, and we talked about the soul earlier. There could be a connection there. Another thing I want to point out is that opals were actually associated with bad luck for a while, and they were avoided by a lot of people. I'm going to link the resources that I looked at down below if you want to read a little bit further about opals and their history. That to me is a sort of foreshadow. Some people consider this to be a source of bad luck, some people don't. It just really depends on the time period you're looking at. If this is truly taking place in an older time period, like I think, then maybe this is a foreshadow of bad luck, of things to come. There are a lot of ways that we can interpret the opal stone here. I do think it's a mixture of things, just like the colors are a mixture. I think the symbolism here can vary depending on your perspective. For me, I do think this is a sort of foreshadow, and I do think that it's very significant that this stone is associated with purity and with fidelity. This is the ultimate type of irony. This whole thing, even though their love is true and pure, it's just something that is not really meant to be. Whenever you do something such as cheating or anything like illicit like this, there's often a price to pay for it. You're losing your own innocence and you are breaking your own moral code. Her whole fiance is there, but she's even thinking about just one body part, the eyes of her true love. That's how deeply she loves that person. He wants what's only yours. Her fiance wants the protagonist's love, but she can't do that. She can't give her fiance her love. That's only meant for the soulmate, for the true love. Then we have repetition of the chorus. Verse 4. Clover blooms in the field, spring breaks loose. The time is near. What would he do if he found us out? Crescent moon, coast is clear. Spring breaks loose, but so does fear. He's gonna burn this house to the ground. So clovers are a type of plant. I will insert a picture here. They generally bloom over several months in the spring or the summer. They have a change of season coming. She even mentions that spring is almost here. All of this was going on in like winter where it was cold literally but also figuratively and emotionally for the protagonist and her true love. We are told that there is a passage of time. It's getting closer and closer to the protagonist like getting married. Things are getting more intense. There's like more of a build up now. In my opinion, the fact that spring is associated with fear is a foreshadow because spring is a time of renewal. It's usually a very positive sort of symbol. It is the brightness after the winter. So to me, the fact that spring is being presented adjacent to fear is very telling. And clovers are often looked at as a positive sort of symbol, but here they're kind of in a negative context because there's fear surrounding the blooming of the clovers. That's why I think that she's getting married in the spring. That would explain why there's fear, a negative emotion surrounding this season that's usually symbolically very positive and very lively. Spring breaks loose, the time is near. I think they're getting married in the spring. They're having a spring wedding. That's how I'm interpreting that. Let me know if you agree or not down below. What would he do if he found us out? This line is showing awareness by the protagonist. The longer she keeps this up, the greater the probability that they'll get found out. So she does have an awareness about this, and that's being expressed here in this line. This is kind of the start of the fear that's referred to later in this verse. She's starting to get scared. It's kind of like a crescendo, like everything is becoming more intense, and just as winter is ending, a lot of new fears are coming to light for the protagonist. The fact that when she's referring to spring arriving, she's saying breaks loose. If something is breaking loose, it means that it was like tied up somewhere. And when something is tied up somewhere, you don't want it to become untied. There's like a reason it's being like restrained there. I think of like that three-headed dog from Harry Potter. Like you definitely want that to like not break loose, but like it did break loose. Spring is breaking loose. Spring is the time that the protagonist is not looking forward to. I think that's when she's supposed to get married. Crescent moon, coast is clear. The crescent moon is when there's a sliver of the moon visible in the night sky. When I looked up the symbolism of a crescent moon, there were a lot of different things that came up. It really does depend on the culture you're in and the time period. The symbolism I found that fit most with this song is that crescent moons represent birth cycles, like cycles of life and death. I thought that was significant because it could be reflective of the life and death of this relationship between the protagonist and her soulmate. And also it's interesting because spring is renewal. It's kind of like the beginning of a new life cycle, especially for animals. So for me, that's how I'm interpreting crescent moon. And the fact that she's saying the coast is clear, I think that she knows this crescent moon is signifying that a new beginning is coming. She's getting married, and also it's going to be harder to keep up with her soulmate. I think this crescent moon is symbolizing the changes that are coming. The protagonist is realizing this. When she's saying the coast is clear, perhaps it's like one of their last times to be together before she has to get married. Again, there's a lot of ways to interpret this symbol. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Spring breaks loose, but so does fear. She's scared because she has to marry a person she doesn't want to be with. There's a chance he might find out. Being found out aside, like she's gonna lose a person that she has a very deep connection with, who has roots in her dreamland. He's gonna burn this house to the ground. The protagonist has been metaphorically represented as a stone house in this song. Oh my God, no. I just had an epiphany. Oh my God, no. I just had an epiphany, okay. The old widow goes to the stone every day, the tombstone. The protagonist is represented metaphorically by a house of stone. So it's the same material as the tombstone. So she is living in a house made of the same material a tombstone is made out of. So she is grieving her own life, and she feels like she's not living. She's not alive. She feels like she's metaphorically dead. Is going to cause that house to potentially burn down. So it's burning of a house that has a negative connotation, but that was still the house that she lived in, right? So there's a few different ways you can look at this. If her husband finds out about them and metaphorically burns the house to the ground, he's pretty much ruining her. And if we are to believe that the protagonist is represented by the house, even though it's a negative space, she feels trapped. The walls are essentially metaphorically walls of death. She still has a place to reside in. But if that house gets burned down, it could either represent freedom, because fire imagery can be cleansing, but I would argue that the burning down of this house would just destroy her and destroy any chance she had to be with her soulmate. There's a lot of different ways to view this, and I understand that some of the things that I'm presenting oppose one another, but I always just try to provide different vantage points for you to take into consideration. I understand that music is very subjective, and we're all going to bring in our own experiences, so my goal is just to point out different vantage points, and then you can take that with you and draw your own conclusions in ways that make the song more meaningful to you, so you can kind of vibe with it more and just hold it closer. For me, I'm viewing this burning of the house as a sort of freedom, but a type of freedom that will ruin the protagonist, because we're getting rid of the walls of metaphorical death, which is really good, but also she's out in the open now in the elements, which is not safe. You know, in that freedom, can she even be with her soulmate at this point? I don't think so, just due to the fact that I believe it's taking place in the olden times. So that's my personal perspective. Again, I hope I'm not confusing you with these different vantage points. I think that when you find a way to think about a song that matters to you, it's a very beautiful experience, and it just kind of emotionally is like a hug. So let me know what you think down below. This song is wild. This is very emo in my opinion. This is the most emo Taylor Swift song, probably more than All Too Well, maybe, potentially. Okay, bye. There's so much going on. This is very chaotic in a very sad way. How's one to know I'd live and die for moments that we stole on begged and borrowed time? So tell me to run, or dare to sit and watch what we'll become and drink my husband's wine. Here we have repetition of the very first lyric in this song, how's one to know? She is still constantly questioning how she is existing in this situation. It's kind of surreal to her. That's the vibe I'm getting. She's expressing that even though they had to be together on begged and borrowed time, she would still want to have it. Even though it was difficult to be together and the context was not super great and there was a lot of fear, she would rather have their love in that negative context than not have their love at all. Time that you have to beg for means that it wasn't easily meant for you, right? You had to work very hard to get it. When you beg for something, power dynamic wise, you have lower power here. When you beg for something too, that's a hit to your ego. That's not a very pleasant position to be in, to have to beg for something. It has a very negative and a very sad connotation. And then borrowed time, when you borrow something, you have to give it back. It's not yours. You have no ownership over it. In this case, everything has a price. The price could potentially be that they get found out and then there's a backlash. Maybe not. I personally am viewing the price they're paying as just the pain that they have to feel. She'll live and die for it, right? She has no regrets about it. No regrets at all. That's how intense and strong and true this love is for her. So tell me to run, or dare to sit and watch what will become. So she's pretty much telling her soulmate, her true love, tell me to run away with you. Say it, or dare to sit and watch what's gonna happen. I don't think this is an ultimatum or anything. This is showing the desperation. Sometimes when you want to do something but you can't bring yourself to do it, you just want someone else to tell you to do it and hope that they're convincing enough. Everything is just emotionally becoming more intense as this progresses, and you'll have to drink my husband's wine. I think this means that before, when they were drinking wine together, it was her fiance's wine, but now it's gonna be her husband's wine. So she's like, if you don't tell me to run away with you, We're not gonna be drinking my fiance's wine anymore. It's gonna be my husband's wine because I'm gonna be married. So if you don't tell me to run away with you, you're gonna have to watch me live a married life. That's what she's saying, in my opinion. Repetition of the chorus, the bridge. So yeah, it's a fire. It's a goddamn blaze in the dark, and you started it. You started it. So yeah, it's a war. It's the goddamn fight of my life, and you started it. You started it. The phrase "so yeah" is repeated. It's kind of just like, and yeah. When you say a phrase like "so yeah," it's usually stated after you've said very intense things and there's no resolution. So you're just like, so yeah, that's a whole thing that I just explained. It's kind of just like a frustrated sort of feeling. It's a fire, it's a goddamn blaze in the dark, but you started it. I think this whole situation is a fire. I talk about fire imagery a lot in my lyric analysis videos. I talked about fire imagery in my lyric analysis of the song Summertime Sadness by Lana Del Rey, and I touched upon it more recently in my lyric analysis of the song Bus Cut Season by Lorde. I will link everything down below in case you want to watch. Very briefly, fire can be positive because it provides light, especially in a darkness. It can provide warmth, which is life-sustaining and important. I think I also talked about fire imagery in the song Peace by Taylor Swift. I'll link that down below too. And when fire is controlled like in a fireplace or like a candle, it's like dancing. The flame is dancing, like the base. It's very beautiful. However, if fire gets out of hand, it's very dangerous and can cause a lot of damage. Earlier in the song, the mention of fire was associated with the protagonist's fiance, right? Burning the house down. But now she's talking to the love interest and she's saying that this whole situation is a fire. It's destruction waiting to happen. And fire can also be synonymous with passion. They are in love and it can be very passionate, but passion, I talk about passion a lot in my Summertime Sadness video. Passion can be very romantic and very beautiful, but if it crosses a line, it can be very dangerous and it can overtake you. And it's just like, it can be a very like not chill thing. Their passion and their love perhaps resulted in a metaphorical fire, and it's a goddamn blaze in the dark. There's a fire in the darkness. This is not a positive thing because it's a blaze, uncontrolled, and it's taking up a relatively large surface area. It's in the dark too, so you can't even see what the fire is burning. There's reduced visibility at night, a more dangerous situation. She's saying that you started it. There's repetition of that lyric. You started it. Again, the protagonist is the stationary house. The love interest, the soulmate, is the ivy that is moving in, that is covering her. The love interest is the one that just walked in to the protagonist's life, right? So the love interest is constantly being associated with things that have movement, the ivy. The protagonist is associated with things that are stationary. The house is stationary. The love interest is choosing to be magnificently cursed. The love interest is the person who is more active in this scenario. They like waltzed in out of nowhere and they're choosing to stay there. It kind of suggests that the protagonist views the situation as like happening to her. Not in a negative way, but I think that's just how she feels, and she is kind of more stationary because she has to settle down with her fiance soon. So yeah, it's a war. It's a war. I think the protagonist is feeling an internal struggle. It's an emotional struggle, a moral struggle. It's like the fight of her life. It's the hardest thing she's had to endure. She's saying you started it. There's repetition of that. You started it. They're like the one that waltzed in. They're the ivy. Poison ivy is a thing that exists, right? So ivy can also be negative. This is a very intense emotional situation. That's what this is all alluding. It can end up very badly because fire can burn things and cause damage, and the war can cause injuries and it can be fatal, just like that fatal flaw that was mentioned earlier. This song ends with repetition of the chorus. I'll just read it. Oh, I can't stop you putting roots in my dreamland. My house of stone, your ivy grows, and now I'm covered in you, in you. Now I'm covered in you. Taylor does what she does often. She ends a song with a repeated verse. I love it when she does this. I always say that it ends the song in a more settled manner. It's not as open-ended. It's a little bit closed off, so it's less intense, which is good because this whole song is very intense. I think it's just showing that despite all of this internal turmoil, this emotional fire, this war, despite all of that, she's still covered in the love, in the essence of this person. It's just a situation where like it is what it is. There's really no resolution to it. She has these feelings for another person and she has to marry someone else. And earlier when she's like screamed out, like, tell me to run away, tell me to run away, I feel like she knew she wasn't going to run away. I think deep down she knew that she was just gonna have to get married. This is just a situation that, like, it is what it is. This song did a really beautiful job of describing the nuances and the emotions felt in this sort of situation. There's unfortunately no resolution to it. It's just, it is what it is. And that's all I have for this song. Let me know your thoughts down below. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. And subscribe if you haven't already, if you want. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Okay, bye. 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 Bye.